So LG have released a brand new range of ultra-wide monitors, one of which is the 34GK950F. Now that's the AMD FreeSync 2 version, and there's also a G-Sync version on the market as well, but because we've got the AMD FreeSync 2 version, we're going to be concentrating on this one today, and we're not going to be talking too much about the G-Sync version, which is also available on the market as well. As the model number suggests, this is a 34-inch monitor, and that's again corner to corner, but because of the ultra-wide nature, it's a lot more long than it is tall, a lot longer than a traditional 16:9 monitor. Now the actual bezels on there measure around 1 centimeter all around the outside, and it has a glossy finish. So on the back you can expect to find 2 HDMI 2 ports, there's also a DisplayPort 1.2, 3 USB ports actually on this particular version. On the G-Sync version there's only 2, and there's also a headphone jack for audio pass-through, and then an audio jack as well if you want to pass through again audio speakers, that kind of thing from the monitor. Audio is carried through HDMI anyway into the monitor. There is built-in speakers, but they're not very good at all. I would stick to using a set of external speakers or even a pair of gaming headphones, or a decent pair of headphones for that decent audio quality. On the back you can find a cable tidy, which means you can run your cables nice and neatly down the back of the stand so it doesn't look like an eyesore on your desk. And a small sort of USB gaming keyboard, mechanical keyboard, will be able to fit in between this very, very wide stand or legs that it's got on the bottom of it. So LG have decided to use an IPS panel, which is very, very nice for color reproduction. It can hit a HDR standard, and it also hits 98.3% of the DCI-P color gamut. You've also got an 1000:1 contrast ratio on here, as well as a host of gaming modes, which I'll go through in a moment, to be able to make the image a lot sharper than a traditional monitor. So as I said, it's actually been badged with VESA's HDR 400 standard, which isn't really the best, it isn't the best standard of HDR you can get on the market, but it does promise to bring you a slightly more increased, kind of punchy image in your highlights and your shadows, and a lot more differentiation between your highlights and shadows if there wasn't HDR on the actual monitor. You do have to pay HDR compatible games and watch HDR compatible movies through Netflix or Amazon Prime or any kind of on-demand video service, but you have got HDR there to take advantage of if you want to. So coming from a traditional 16:9 monitor, 4K monitor, to an ultra-wide, I noticed that when I first used the HDMI cable from my desktop PC to the actual monitor, that the resolution was very off, and it made everything look a little bit stretched out, which made me a little bit confused at first. But I had to dive into my NVIDIA control panel options, and I realized that it was still a 3840 by 2160 resolution playing through this, which is a standard 16:9 4K, but you have to change that to an ultra-wide resolution, which this hits 3840 by 1440p, and that gives you a much nicer ultra-wide kind of image quality. So with gaming being such a heavy focus with this monitor, it comes with a nice amount of custom kind of picture profiles that you can switch depending on what you're doing with the actual monitor itself. Now the 2 gaming ones you have got are for first-person shooters and real-time strategy. There are a couple of custom options on there as well that you can customize yourself and really dive into the actual picture quality and get the best, your opinion of the best image. Now I've generally stuck to Vivid throughout this review because I just thought that was the brightest, that was the sharpest, and that gave me the best picture quality without diving. I'm not an expert on kind of calibrating monitors. I'm not claiming that I am, so Vivid was very good. I did use first-person shooter mode when playing things like Battlefield 5 and Call of Duty Black Ops 4. I'm not really a real-time strategy gamer, so I didn't really touch that. There is also an e-reader mode which dims the screen and makes it a lot easier on the eyes to read text from a web page, very much like what a Kindle does, for example, with the contrast between the black text and the white background. It does a very good job of that. As I said, there's a Vivid mode, you've got standard mode which just puts everything kind of like a flat rate across the board, but you've also got things like an sRGB mode if you want to watch Netflix and you want a bit more colour from that, or if you're colour grading footage in something like Premiere Pro, you've got an sRGB mode on there as well. And there's also an HDR upscaler, which means that if you're not watching any kind of HDR content, the monitor does its best to try and turn that content into HDR. Again, it's not the best, but it does provide a little bit better picture quality to the highlights and the shadows and the differentiation between them. So as I said earlier, this monitor has AMD FreeSync 2, which is a variable refresh rate, so the monitor can a lot better match the refresh rate that the graphics card is pumping out to give you a lot smoother looking image. Now, unfortunately, I do use an NVIDIA graphics card, so I wasn't able to test that, but the actual monitor as a native refresh rate is at 144 Hz. That is, you can't overclock that. But if you do go for the G-Sync version, it's clocked from the box at 100 Hz, but is overclockable to 120 Hz, so do bear that in mind as well. Now there is also something on this monitor called black stabilization, which comes in a number of levels, and you can change that depending on how bright you want the shadowy areas in games. So if you're playing a game, for example, like Shadow of the Tomb Raider, or even Black Ops, like Zombies, for example, on the 1X map, or 9 Zombies map, where you're in the underground, you can change the black stabilization, and it will just kind of add a few highlights to that shadowy area. So it'll just give you a better picture quality in those kind of shadowy areas, but that's down to your preference on how dark you want shadowy areas to be in games, but you have got that option there. So I think playing something like Battlefield 5, it gave me a slight advantage with this particular monitor, because you see a lot more than you would see on a traditional 16:9 monitor. So if you've got enemies coming in from the corner, then they are a lot easier to spot on this monitor than they are on a traditional 16:9, because you've just got that extra wide field of view, which I think looks absolutely wonderful in games, and LG has really almost converted me to these types of monitors. They do a very, very good job of making you feel extremely immersed into the game you're actually playing. I've played a number of Battlefield games now, and win or lose, it doesn't bother me, because I've enjoyed my time with this monitor, because I've just felt so engrossed in that particular game that I'm playing. So as well as the decent spec of this monitor that I've already gone through, LG have introduced a couple of technologies that just increase the quality of this monitor even further. And the first one is a way of reducing motion blur in games. Now, I never play with motion blur on anyway. I don't like that fake look motion blur. But what LG have done is they insert a black frame in between each video frame that appears on the monitor. And this apparently, although you never see it flickers too fast for any human eye to be able to see. It's there to help reduce motion blur in games. And I must say, playing something like Battlefield, when you whip the mouse around, it's very sharp, it's very smooth, it's very vivid. It's just a way of reducing motion blur even further in games than turning off the in-game motion blur options, especially with something like Battlefield 5, Call of Duty, any kind of fast-paced first-person shooters, driving games like Forza Horizon 4, for example. It just helps with motion blur and keeps everything looking really sharp and smooth. So the other technology that they use is something called Dynamic Action Sync, or DAS for short, and that essentially reduces input lag from your graphics card to the monitor, so it can pump out a lot more frames than it normally would if it didn't have this technology on there, keeping a lot more frames on the actual monitor itself. Again, it just helps with making things look super sharp and super smooth and nice and vivid for the end user. So how does this work in reality? Well, pretty good, I think. It's certainly a monitor that's able to produce a super sharp and super clear, super vivid image, especially when playing something like Battlefield 5. You just feel completely immersed in the game you're actually playing, and as I say, everything just looked absolutely wonderful through this monitor. Even when we've jumped onto older games like, I don't know, for example, Guild Wars. I know that we're old school here. Techno-Ovo are very old school when it comes to games. We enjoy Guild Wars. Don't at me. But even playing something like that, the colours and the scenery, it's a lot more cartoony than Battlefield 5, but it just looked very sharp, very vivid, and super smooth, especially when there are a number of players on the map and everyone's firing off spells at once, the colours going everywhere. It just looks amazing on this particular monitor. I couldn't be more pleased with the performance that this monitor actually gave. And I must admit, I do want to call this one of the best monitors that I have ever used for gaming purposes. LG are very, very quickly turning me to ultra-wide monitors. If they're coming out now and they're as good as this, they're definitely turning me to kind of the ultra-wide monitors. It's going to be a shame to see this one go. This is a review unit that LG have sent me. Of course, we have to send it back, unfortunately, but I am going to be so upset when I see this go, because it is just a wonderful monitor. So even in terms of productivity, we use Premiere Pro here, Adobe Premiere Pro at Techno-Ovo, to create our YouTube videos and our Facebook videos. And being an ultra-wide monitor and having the resolution there, let me put it this way. When you've got a 16:9 monitor, I always find that I begin to run out of space. I like everything in front of me, and I like most of my tabs open that I'm using, most of the control panels that I'm using as well. I like everything in front of me. With this particular monitor, because the resolution sort of compensates for sort of an ultra-wide area, then you've got the option to bring out more panels and have everything on your screen at once. Now, when I was working, I had my raw source footage, I had color grading footage, I had my sidebar for my effects, my timeline spanned across the bottom of the monitor, And then you've got things like your effects browser, your effects controls, media browser, that kind of thing down the left-hand side. Everything was just a lot more spaced out, especially at that 4K kind of resolution, 3840 by 1440. Everything just looked a lot more spaced out and you had a lot more room to play with. But for Premiere Pro, After Effects video editing, dedicated video editing software, this monitor, being able to stretch everything out was absolutely superb, and it just improved workflow. So what more can I say about the LG 34GK950 monitor? Not much really. I mean, everything about this monitor I absolutely loved. Sure, I wish I tried out the G-Sync version, but the 144Hz native refresh rate of this particular monitor was just more than enough. I didn't notice any really harsh kind of screen tearing from refresh rates with the monitor itself, and I don't have vertical sync on while in game because, I don't know, it's just too performance demanding. But this monitor is absolutely fantastic. A wonderful monitor to use, I can't praise it enough. So thank you very much for checking out our video review of the LG 34GK950 monitor. If you enjoyed the review, then do click that like button. Please do subscribe to keep up with all of our latest tech and gaming videos, and also check out our live stream over on Twitch and on YouTube. We live stream a few times a week as well. Leave a comment below letting us know what you think of this monitor and whether you like it, whether it's something that you would see yourself investing in, like an ultra-wide monitor, whether you would like any more information. Ask me a question, I don't mind. I'll get to as many comments as possible. But yeah, just leave us a comment. Let's start a discussion down below about this particular panel. So thank you very much for watching, and we will see you in the next video.